Alright, so it's time to start designing, and what we want to do is we want to end up something similar to this. So the program that we're doing this in is called Autodesk Fusion 360. You need to open that from your desktop. It's an orange F icon. When you open it, you're going to want to, well, it's going to let me start a new design. Yours might look more like this. What you want to do is, first off, in your document settings, make sure that you hit this little drop down and that it's in inches. If this isn't in inches, you click on this little change units that shows up on the right, set this to inch, set it as your default, and say OK. Okay, so we need to remember the size that we're designing this. It's going to influence a lot of how we design. When we looked at our barrel on here, it is 1.5 inches, and the thing is we don't want it exactly 1.5 inches, because if we do that, it's going to be too tight in this barrel. There needs to be a little bit of a slop in there, or a tolerance range. So let's talk about tolerances. A machining tolerance, which is also referred to as dimensional accuracy, is the amount of permitted variance in the dimension of a part. This involves setting a maximum and a minimum dimension limit for the part. So I have an example here below. Here's a shaft and here's a hole. They want this shaft to slide easily into this hole. And you can see right here there is a tolerance range. So the diameter of this hole is a maximum of 1.250 of an inch, and then a minimum of 1.25 and a maximum of 1.251. So it's got to be within these numbers. So if I were to subtract these from each other, there'd be a small tolerance there, that a little bit of a play that you could play with. Same here. The shaft has to be within 12.48 and 1.248 and 1.247. So we don't want to make it exactly 1.251, because then it's going to be too tight. So here we go. We know that ours needs to be 1.5 inches or close to it. If I take 1.5 and divide it by 2, that gives me 3/4 of an inch, or 0.75. If we made it exactly, because what we're going to do is we're going to make half of it and then revolve it. So if we make half of it this size and revolve it, it'll end up being 1.5. And if we do that, it'll be too big. So we want to subtract a little bit off of this. So let's say we want to do, I don't know, like 0.72 or 0.73. Let's do 0.72 just to be safe. Well, let's do 0.73. So if I do 0.73 and I times it by 2, it's a little under 1/2 inch. So it's not 1.5, it's 1.46. So we're going to try 0.73 for our design. So let's go ahead by creating a new sketch, selecting a plane, and then drawing a rectangle. This rectangle we're going to snap here to the center point, drag up and to the right. Remember that our half of our diameter of this is, we're going to do 0.73. So I type that in for my width. I'm going to hit tab on my keyboard, and let's make it for now about 5 inches, and then enter. So we have a rectangle that's 0.73 by 5. Now we need to try to mimic the look of a projectile. So if we remember back to right here, you can see that it's a little tapered on the bottom, has a flat spot, and then a longer taper here at the top. And it doesn't come to a perfect point, it's a little blunt. So you could take this and like make it half your screen if you want, or just kind of remember that shape. If But I'm going to try to mimic that shape. And the tool I'm going to use to mimic that is called the spline tool. It's up here in the parent tools of the create tab. And I'm going to start with the top. I'm going to zoom in and snap it, not right here because that'll make it a point, but a little bit to the left. And it doesn't have to be perfect, we're just kind of playing around with this. But everywhere you click is going to make a pivot point. So I'm going to click about there, and I'm going to snap it to about there and hit enter. Now I have kind of this taper here. From there it needs to be flat for a little bit. So I can take a line tool, or there already is a line there, but you can take a tool if you want and bring it to about there. And then we need a little taper here at the end as well. So I'm going to grab my spline tool again. I'm going to snap it to where I left off. And not much, but just create a little bit of a taper. And then enter. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is delete what I don't want. So I'm going to come up here to my modify tab and select the trim tool. And I'm going to trim this and this. And I'm going to zoom in and trim this and this. And just leave that half of a projectile design that we have there. Okay, once I have this all dialed in, what I can do is say finish sketch. And come up to my create tab, do the drop down, and select the revolve tool. And it automatically selects this. I can tell because it's blue and it says one selected for profile. So I can just leave that, and then I can click, it says select the axis that I want it to rotate around. So I'm going to select this line on the right side. When I select that, it rotates that profile around that center point. So now if I look at it, you can see I have that projectile profile. I'm going to say OK. Okay, so if you look, we're most of the way there. We have a pretty good profile going. What we can do now is we can adjust it. Like these ones, I think the taper is a little longer. So if I want to go back to my original sketch, I can, and I can drag this taper and make it a little longer like that. So you can always go back and adjust stuff if you want. Yeah, so go ahead and play with it, get the profile that you want. And then even you can make it taller if you want. This one looks like it's not quite as tall as these are, as skinny. So you can go back and drag the top of this up and adjust things a little more. You need to undo is Control Z. Let's see what that looks like. So it's not too bad. I'm going to go back to it again, and I'm going to kind of pull this up and out like that. There we go, it's getting closer. So anyways, you can play with that and always go back and re-edit your original sketch. Okay, after I have my profile, I'm going to go to the bottom of this by selecting my view cube in the top. And I want to put my initials right here. So when we shoot these, we don't want to lose them. So I'm going to create a sketch. And once again, I'm going to rotate that and create the sketch on this surface. See how it highlighted? For some reason, it created a sketch somewhere else. So I'm going to do Control Z to undo that. I'm going to hit Create Sketch again. And I'm going to select the bottom of this. I'm going to zoom in and do the drop down on Create and pick my text tool and drag a little box like that. And I'm just going to put my initials, and you can adjust the size of them right here. I'll make them larger or smaller. You can play with the font, but some of the fonts don't extrude, so just know that. And say OK. Put this, kind of center it. I'm going to rotate my view cube a little bit and zoom out, and I'm going to say finish sketch, and I'm going to extrude that and just pull it down a little bit. Doesn't have to be too deep, just a little bit. Okay, so now that I have that done, I can come and clean up a couple parts. Like this edge, I can fill it if I want. If you click on the edge and say fill it, just rounds it over a little bit. So you can type in numbers to play around with this. 0.2 is a little too much. If I do 0.15, 0.1, that looks good. You could also do it at the top if you like. I'm going to leave the top of mine how it is. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to change the material of this. So I'm going to do the drop down on modify, go to physical material, and I'm going to choose metal. And there's a whole bunch of different options in here. If I want to do something that's accurate, I could do brass or copper. So there's brass. I'll leave mine as brass. There's a lot of fun things you can play around with in here. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is we want to put some rifling on this, since our barrel isn't rifled. So the way that you rifle this is you go to the modify tool, or sorry, the create tool, and pick coil and select the bottom. And you want to find the center of the bottom. Right there is the center. And you want to click, oops, that's not working. Let's try it one more time. Do coil. Okay, so I have the coil tool selected. I'm going to select this part that highlights. Sometimes because of your initials, it doesn't let you select the center of the circle. So what you can do is you can flip it over and select the center of this circle. So I'm going to zoom in here, find the center, it's going to let me here. There it is. Okay. And then I'm going to drag it out about the diameter of this coil or bullet and click, and it's going to create a coil. And I'm going to grab the arrow that's at the top of this coil and drag it through the projectile. And then on the right I have some options that I can change. This spins too many times, so I want to change that to like 0.2, so it's just like part of a revolution. If we look at our barrel, you know, they're not too drastic of turns, so I think 0.2 should work. So I have 0.2. I'm going to go ahead and look at this from the back, and look at this little cutout that it's making. You can change it to be square, which is more like rifling is square, and you can adjust things over here, or you can drag this some of these arrows, so that shows how deep it's going to cut. We don't really need it that deep, but we want it to at least be on this flat part, cut in. So that looks pretty good. I want to make it a little bigger, so this section size, I'm going to mess around with it and say 0.5. That looks pretty good. I'm going to drag that up a little bit. I just made it a little wider. I might even go bigger than that. Maybe like 0.8. Then drag it up. Okay. Say OK. Now we have a nice little cut in it. Now we need to revolve this. So we go to the modify, sorry, not the modify, the create, and go down to pattern and circular. And then on the right, you need to pick features and click on that, and it'll select the whole feature. And then select axis and pick any circle that shows up. That circle would work. This outer circle would work, but I'm just going to pick this one. And then I want to say more than 3, maybe like 8. Let's do more than that, like 10. Okay, and I could go even more. If you look at the rifling, it's like half of it's rifling, half of it's a high spot, half of it's rifling, half of it's a high spot. So I'm gonna go back to that tool, and I'm gonna make it a little higher number, maybe like 14. Getting closer. I'm gonna do even more. I'm gonna do maybe 16. And that's close enough. Okay. So now that that's all finished, you just have to save it to print. So here's how you do that. You go File, 3D Print, and then you just drag a box over it and make it all blue. Uncheck Send to 3D Print utility. Say OK. Put it as your name. And then on your computer, right now I can see it saving to my desktop, but I can select here and choose a different place for it to save. But just make sure you know where it's going and what it's named. Say save. And now you can go into Canvas and submit this. And in the comments, tell me what color you want it printed. All right, thank you.